Speaker today is Dr. Missy Cummings, Director of the Humans and Autonomy Lab at Duke University. Missy is also a former Navy fighter pilot, so she has a unique and valuable perspective on human automation teaming in military systems. Please welcome Dr. Cummings.
Thanks, Paul. Hello, I am quite aware that I'm standing in between you and the booze. So I'm going to try to make this quick and enjoyable, and hopefully we'll have time left for some questions. So I picked this title because, first of all, I just wanted to recognize who else is a big Clint Eastwood fan. Because if you're a Clint Eastwood fan, it also means you get the joke behind the name of my laboratory. If you don't get it, you have to ask somebody over 40 what that means. So I'm going to take on a little professorial air here and lecture you a little bit about what is automation, what is artificial intelligence, what is autonomy. And I speak to this in this rubric that I call the SRKE framework, the Skills, Rules, Knowledge, and Expertise framework. This stems out of some earlier research from Jens Rasmussen from the Netherlands, where we're focusing on what behaviors, what reasoning events need to occur for any agent to navigate through any world. And this could be a human or it could be automation. And so because I was a former fighter pilot, like you heard, I like to put it in the context of flying. And so in the first picture you see next to skills, what this is showing you is that for a person to fly an airplane, the very first thing they must learn to do is keep the aircraft in balanced flight. They need to make sure that they learn what altitude is, heading, how to control the speed and the throttle, and you actually spend about a good year just learning to keep the plane in balanced flight. That is a skill. Once you do it enough, it becomes highly automatic. You don't really have to think about it again. Most pilots can go from one aircraft to another and keep the plane in balanced flight. Maybe it's not pretty, maybe you need just a little bit of a learning curve, but you get it, you understand how to do this. Once you've actually freed up enough cognitive resources beyond once the skills that you've learned, then you can start to learn how to apply rules in your world. And we consider these procedures. When an engine fire light goes off, we understand there's a set of procedures. I don't necessarily have to commit all of them to memory. I have to commit just about 2 or 3 to memory. And then I break out the book and then I follow along in the book. So once I freed up enough cognitive resources and I really understand how to quickly get through my book and my procedures, then I have enough cognitive resources to devote to knowledge-based events. And you're starting to see you're going up this big arrow. And as you're going up the arrow, what that means is uncertainty is also increasing. And so as uncertainty grows in your world, you have to start applying these higher levels of reasoning because you have to start making guesses, you or automation or AI. So at knowledge-based reasoning, there's no clear procedure. Something has happened, there might be an element of one procedure that applies and another procedure applies, but it's not clear. There's no rule book. And you have to start making some guesses. And I like to quote The Miracle on the Hudson for this one, because Chesley Sullenberger had to make a guess. Dual engine flame out. He knows what to do when there's an engine flame out. He actually knew what to do with both engines immediately, but then where to land. Lots of guesswork involved, not clear that he was going to make it back to the airfield, so he decided to ditch the aircraft. So, and it is because of that, it is because he had to deal with the most uncertainty that a pilot would have to face, he actually then gains expertise. And so I know many pilots who have the same number of hours that he has, about 20,000+, close to 30,000, but they're not as much of an expert as he is because he had to deal with the maximal uncertainty that required his expert judgment, and he didn't really even know what to do until he did it. And so if we start to think about where automation is in our everyday life, we have autopilots. Autopilots are excellent. There is a reason that commercial airline pilots only touch the stick about 3 minutes of every flight. Why? Because as long as the automation is flying the plane, there's a substantial savings in gas. So the airlines save a ton of money, the carbon footprint goes down, and it's not just in the fuel economy. If the automation lands the planes, then that saves the tires. And their tire bill, the airline's tire bill goes way down. These are all skills. Why can we automate the skills? because we've got really excellent sensors, very mature systems, 10 to the minus ninth, that give us the reliability that we need to keep that plane moving in balanced flight. We go up to scale a little bit, we've also got auto nav. Auto nav is pretty good, which are a set of rules. And we can do that because we've got really good maps, we can sense the world around us in aviation very clearly. And then that's about where we see the limits of automation today. And that's where automation then stops when we have very clear sensing and a very clear rule book. Once you start to tip past that point, now you're starting to increase the degrees of autonomy that you need, because you can think of autonomy as a sense of guessing. How am I going to guess to manage the uncertainty in the world around me? Now, I do a lot of work on killer robots. You know, we could get into the argument about what killer robots are. I do think Elon Musk is hilarious for trying to come out against artificial intelligence in killer robots, when in fact the only robot that's ever actually killed anyone is his Tesla, with any sense of autonomy on it. Oh, don't get me started. Now, if we want to start thinking about weapon systems, so you could think about AAA, anti-aircraft artillery. That's kind of a skill-based weapon that we have. It's just got a very simple radar, actually. It tracks aircraft, and it just keeps a nice close feedback loop that we teach in basic controls engineering in college. So really not a lot of rules going on, even just some basic tracking and shooting. Track, shoot, track, shoot. But then you go up a little bit, and this is a picture of an AMRAAM. AMRAAMs are radar-guided missiles. And my flight instructor once told me, he said, they're like wild dogs in a meat locker. You put that thing on it, and you make sure it gets its fire control radar in, that you support a little bit from your plane until it gets close enough, and then it'll go for it, right? But it's going for it not because it has any smarts, but basically because it's following a prescribed set of rules that have been coded. They're actually really simple systems. They're not as advanced as these weapons are and as expensive as they are, and I hope there's no weapons manufacturers in there. They're really simple aircraft from a logical standpoint, weapons from a logical standpoint. So most weapons you see today are at the rule and below. But we start to bridge that gap a little bit with the Tomahawk. And in fact, this is what I think is so interesting about the Tomahawk weapon. It is actually a relatively old weapon that we've had for a long time, but it actually has the most advanced smarts of any weapon that we see today in an inventory that we use on a regular basis. Why? That's because it has digital scene mapping inside of its brain, and it takes a picture of the world around it when it's doing its low altitude contour following, and it takes the picture that it has in its brain, and it matches against the picture it sees in the world, and when it matches, it knows where it is. That is actually very much in line with how pattern recognition for driverless cars is working today. We're matching the scenes around us, right? So not really advanced autonomy, but certainly a first step. And so when we start to talk about banning AI, this is something I teach. I work every day in AI. I cannot tell you, I am a little worried. I would never drive in a driverless car that any of my students built, ever, because it's a very difficult topic. But, we are still not quite to the place where we're embedding true autonomy, even in, I would say, experimental weapons. And this is why you see me go over to the Atlas robot. So the Atlas robot is a really good robot right now at the skill level. But even still, it struggles to maintain balance, and Boston Dynamics has done a really good job. It's something that they're working on, but they're working primarily still very much at the skill, possibly a little bit of the rule. What would that robot have to do to go all the way to knowledge-based reasoning? It would be able to have language, to conduct language, to have conversations with significant background noise, to be able to have sensors that could operate in all scenarios under all weather conditions. These are still issues that we're really struggling with in research labs around the world, and so we are nowhere near, at this point in time, doing a slide all the way over to full autonomy. But when we start to think about trying to ban AI, even though the technology is not there, I think it's important to remember what people really need to think about when they want to ban a weapon is, are they trying to ban a technology because of its capability or incapability, or are they trying to ban a particular outcome? And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I wanted to show you a few real-world issues about just how well autonomous systems are handling uncertainty in the world today. So this is a picture from Toyota Research Institute in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I work with them every now and then, Gil Pratt, John Leonard, really great guys. And they gave me this picture so that I could communicate to you just where we are in thinking about autonomy for driverless cars. And I know you're like, well, you were talking about weapons, but why are we talking about driverless cars now? Because, in fact, these two areas are going to be more and more difficult to untangle as time goes on. But I would tell you right now, in terms of computer vision, driverless cars are more advanced than most military systems you'll see. So let's start here. Very, very advanced. Toyota driverless car gets to an intersection in Cambridge. Is everybody watching? You got to pay attention. It's going to come fast. This is what the driver, who is the babysitter of the automation, sees. This is what the automation sees. This is what the car, this is how the car interprets the world. Okay, let's go back. Everybody ready? Let's go back just so you see it. The real world, you ready? The computer's vision of the world. And so your ability to reason under uncertainty and to take all the little individual bits and pieces told your brain through inductive reasoning that you just see a truck going through an intersection. What does the car see? The car sees a gigantic human about to attack it, 2 trucks, a bus, a fence, a bunch of poles, and a traffic sign, right? So, and I have to tell you, this is about as advanced as it gets right now. And so how does that happen? It happens because this is a data-driven world. The cars are taking every bit of data. They're trying to make a guess about what the world is, but we haven't figured out yet, and I still put that as a yet, how to enable inductive reasoning in machines, because right now this is a very data-driven, bottoms-up set of reasons that it's trying to come to. All right. This is why you really, this keeps me awake at night. Real quick, I heard that you heard about this, right? You saw this earlier today. So, and I heard you got a little bit of a lecture, which is good, about how artificial intelligence, these pattern recognition algorithms, if you took those crazy Berkeley glasses and put some clever patterns on them, that you can trick an algorithm, if you know how the algorithm works, to see something it doesn't see. Guess where that's coming to you, to a set of Russian hackers near you next. So a couple of people related to that trial also went to, did a separate study to show what would it take to trick a driverless car and see a sign that it didn't really see. So these 4 stickers, black and white stickers, put on a stop sign, made it see that sign as 45 miles per hour. So you could imagine, and this is, but I call this passive hacking. So I would have never, none of us would have ever noticed really those squares on that sign. We all would have driven right by that sign and thought, graffiti, the DOT is not doing its job. And if a driverless car had seen this unattended, it would run that stop sign, right? And yes, it's in a research lab, academic lab right now, and yes, you have to have some smarts. Your average hacker is not going to be able to do this today, but I'm only half kidding when I say the academic trick today is your average Russian hacker's toolbox tomorrow. It is only a matter of time before this propagates in a way that you'll start seeing this, not just in the military, not just at face recognition, but in the way that these computer vision cameras see the world. And what is kind of alarming about the driverless car world is the driverless car community is going to get to production and to massive implementation of these technologies on a much bigger scale than the military could have ever hoped to achieve. And because of that, we're going to start seeing access to the technology by groups of people, by regular hackers that you would never guess. Now, and it's not all bad news. You're like, oh, let's get to the bar sooner than later so we can start drinking. I did want to tell you that there are really positive things to think about where AI is. I actually put the slides together, John, before I knew you were going to be here. So this is John Langford's baby. This is the Alias program, and it was a project that Aurora Flight Sciences, soon to be Boeing, they were the lead PIs, and I was just one of their mere subcontractors on it. But you effectively can think of this Alias project as an R2-D2 of the future. Those of you who are Star Wars fans, R2-D2 was Luke Skywalker's or Pilot X's co-pilot that would sit in the back. So I think we did try to start with R2-D2, and we got called out on it by Lucasfilms, and we had to change the name to R2-A2 because we're clever. And so this is a robot arm that acts just like R2-D2, or at least the closest approximation that we have. The robot can respond to voice commands. It's not sexy. It doesn't have a cool little personality yet like R2-D2. But if you ultimately tell it that you want to go to the back while you go get a cup of coffee, and so can it take the plane, it can do that. It can actuate switches. It can understand what you are doing. And this is still in the early days of Alias. But this kind of collaboration is, to me, where I see the greatest strength of AI in the future. Not that we try to replace humans, but we try to figure out how to augment humans, and so that we can take some of those skills and rules that are taking so much of our cognitive resources to apply in our daily world to free us up to actually use the knowledge and the expertise, which is where humans bring the most judgment and the most value. Humans, in this way, by combining the two, letting the automation / autonomy / AI do your grunt work and let the humans be the quarterback, the coach, this is going to be the real strength of the future. That's my favorite picture of a flying car. Flying cars, probably one of the funnest yet craziest projects I'm working on right now at NASA. Also, John is in this space, so he can regale you with tales of what it's like to be trying to move into the future really fast. So flying cars are the quintessential combination of the driverless AI problem and taking the flight AI problem and combining them all together. So don't hold your breath. You're not going to pull out your iPad or your iPhone anytime soon and call the driverless car to come and pick you up and then whisk you off. We're still quite a ways away from that. I would actually tell you really more for regulatory reasons than anything else. But why does it matter in terms of this conversation? It matters because there is so much tech hype out there right now. I'm going to Dubai in a week, so hopefully we're going to see some flying car action happening out there. Dubai is taking this very seriously. They've got Volocopter out there, they've got eHang out there, and they are trying really hard to start a flying car service. Well, that's great, and we're still pretty far away from it. But I think what is really, truly amazing about this technology that is coming way faster than I ever thought it would come is, it's that same issue with what is going on in the civilian world versus the defense world. It is very likely that civilians will have driverless cars and that technology well before military people ever will. And so what is that going to mean when Marines go in and take a city and they've got to contend with civilians fleeing in a flying car, or that ISIS or some other agency figures out how to hack into a flying car that maybe could have civilians and maybe not could have civilians. And so what's interesting to me about where we are in time is that the development is happening so fast in the civilian world and is so rapidly outpacing what the United States military is capable of, and likely other militaries are capable of. It really makes you wonder then what's going to happen to the military and where are we at in losing our cutting edge. And so let me just show you one last picture to give you an idea of where we sit now in terms of funding. And so what you see is you see these different industries: aerospace and defense, automotive, information and communication, which are the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, and the energy sectors. And what you're seeing are the money that the U.S. has spent basically in the last 3 years versus what's happening in the rest of the world. And I heard the last panel, so you already heard a little bit about how China was jumping ahead, but what is this really telling you? First of all, it's telling you that the driverless car world right now, in terms of R&D, is outspending the U.S. defense R&D by 3-to-1. Facebook and Google are outspending them by 10-to-1. And in fact, it's not even clear where driverless cars, are they in the 10-to-1, are they in the 3-to-1? They're actually in both of those R&D fields. But either way, they're grossly outspending what is happening in the United States in terms of our R&D funding. Why does that matter? It matters because every day I am impacted by the draw of the sirens on the island of Scilly Valley, pulling all of my people out there. I know John, his company feels it. We feel it. I just lost my best research scientist 2 days ago to a driverless car company. I'm going to be honest with you. Paul may want to ask me in a year to do this, and I'm going to be out of academia. I mean, there is so much money. They are recruiting, they being IT companies, the Googles, the Facebooks. Students are getting recruited before they graduate with their undergraduate degrees if they're superstar coders. This is not a game, and it's not a funny little anecdote that we're telling anymore. We can't get robotics professors. All universities, if you were to go to the job board and find out robotics professors, opening at every single school. We just can't get enough. We're all overworked. It is enviable to be a research professor, to have all the money that we have and have all the projects that we have, but it's not sustainable. We can't do it. So we as a country need to figure out, how are we going to address this? There is a massive brain drain, and it's not just in the US. China is coming on strong. Most university engineering schools look Chinese and Indian, and I will tell you, want to be controversial, they are better students. They work harder, they put the hours in, they are hungry for it. They want to be top roboticists. My Indian students and my Chinese students run circles around most of my American students. And so when we've got such a gap growing in this country, how we're going to fill the education gap, how we're going to pump enough people out, how we're going to introduce coding at every single stage in education. I mean, this is a battle that needs to be fought by universities, but it also has to be fought by companies, think tanks, government agencies, because we need that demand to come from on high, because as much as bureaucratic as you think the government is, the universities are ridiculously slow to change, but they will change as long as they're getting influence from the right people outside of the university. I'm sorry I ran a little bit over. Well, hopefully we have some time for questions.